Hey everybody, let's talk about different bits this week. So I decided with the Etsy store, if you guys remember I've got one, to start making checkers. I think people need to have fun, and checkers are a simple thing to generate in 3D. But the checkers that I'm going to make are kind of different. What I'm doing is sketched images on top of one set of checkers. So unlike the crowns that you see on the other, each side will have its own set of characters on it. So like I've got the one up right now is a bear on one side and a wolf on the other. Right? So you can easily tell, even though they're color-coded, you can easily tell which side's which. In addition to that, I decided to do some three-dimensional ones. So I got the sketch ones, and the sketch ones are pretty much flat, right? They can fit on top of the checker, just like the crowns that you see on a lot of traditional checkers can. But I've got a Halloween set that I'm playing with right now that has a skull for one side and a pumpkin for the other, and both of those are three-dimensional. They rise up out of the base in a flat format. So I had thought about making them as a skull, just rising above, or as a pumpkin sitting on top. All right, pumpkin's pretty easy. It's got that nice flat bottom to it, but the skull isn't. If you think of a human skull, the chin is down below the back of the skull, right? So I could tip it back and try to do something like that with it. It's still a little difficult when you think about printing. In order to do it correctly, I'd have to put something underneath the back of the skull, and it could be something like a spine. But again, remember you're printing things out. You can't have something dangling in space unless you put supports in place. I don't want to have a lot of supports to clean up on these pieces. The reason for that is the more supports that I have, the longer it takes me to get an order out the door. While I'll be making sure that I have at least one set on hand, and then we'll make them to make another set once I sell one so I can replenish my inventory. Unlike what I was doing with the bookmarks, which is actually just print it when the order came in. These would be done a little differently, and the reason for that isn't because of the timing. It's twofold. One is I have to make sure that I've got filament on hand, right? I don't have 18 versions of each color. So I've got to make sure that I've got filament on hand. And I want the order to go out the door when I get the order. I don't want it to have to wait a week while I get the filament or do something else. The print times are pretty short. So it's not like I have to worry about how long they're going to take to print, and I can print the entire batch in one setting. Think of it as like making a batch of cookies. You set the thing up for the number that you want, in this case 13, the dozen that you need for the game, plus an extra should you lose one. You start that up and you let it go. So that's pretty straightforward to set that up and just go with it, and the printer will automatically change the colors, so that isn't an issue. But I wanted to have it just kind of ready to go. Won't be doing the boards with these things. The checker sets will be specific. I'll probably do some holiday themed ones as we get more toward the holiday. Might do some ones come next Valentine's Day, like a heart on one side and an arrow on the other. But again, to get them out the door relatively quickly and easily, they have to be printable and go out as printed. If you think about something like a human skull, right, that chin comes down, and you can print the chin, right? You put the chin into a base, that's great. But once you get to the back of the skull, it's now hanging in space, and nothing's going to print that way. So that means you have to put some kind of support underneath it. Now, you could create something that looks like wood, for example, and put that under the base of the skull so that the skull's sitting there. But let's say we wanted to do that, right? And you wanted to have something that looked like wood. You can't print that, not easily anyway. And the reason for that is everything gets printed in line, right? Start from the bottom, work your way up. So if you change a color for that layer, that color changes all the way around. So if I were to put a wooden skull or wooden piece in the back, behind the back of the skull, and I did it in brown, there's two ways it can be printed. One way, you would put it into the chin in the front, right? The chin and the teeth would be brown because they would have to match the block in the back. The other way is to have the printer have to swap the color out. And that can be tricky. You can set it up. I mean, it's not that difficult to set it up in the slicer for it. But think of what has to happen mechanically. It could do the chin, right? But it can't do the brown in the back. So in order to do the brown in the back, it has to print the chin part, stop, swap out the color, print the brown in the back, one layer. Remember, this is a layer at a time. Then switch the color back to the white of the skull, do the front part of the skull, stop, switch back to brown. Every time you do that, you're wasting filament. The reason you're wasting filament is each filament print has to clear out of the extruder, right? So it's not just that you swap the color out and the other color immediately comes in and prints. Nope, you've got some of it in the extruder already. So that's got to be cleared out. So that's got to come out. And that's what affectionately is called 3D printer poop. They come out in a little spiral of material in a little pile, and that gets spit out of the back of the printer. So every time it switched from white to brown, you'd lose a bit of the white, you'd lose a bit of the brown, more than what you were printing. Like I said, it can be done, but it's very wasteful. Be easier to paint it. Again, takes more time to paint it, but the issue I've got with the waste isn't the cost of it, but I don't like to throw more things into the environment than need be. The PLA that I use is biodegradable under certain circumstances. Now, I've got as you guys know, I did some feeders. I've got a feeder with a roof. For the heck of it, I did a black roof. Now, the black feeder that I did, that's open on both sides, is kind of like a bowl shape with arms coming up the top, has been holding up just fine, but it's a thick material. When I did the roof, I did a very thin piece of material. Now, why I did that is the print that I started with, that I got off of one of the sites, had a rather thick roof to it, and it used quite a bit of material, even though it's open inside, right? If you've got a pitched roof, you have to have 3 sides of the roof. You can't just have a pitch. You can't print that. So it had to have a body inside of it, and that was a lot of printing. And the purpose of the roof is basically twofold. The first part of it is to keep things from getting into where the seed is and keep the rain out of it. The roof doesn't really extend far enough out to protect the birds, and if it did, it would make the feeder kind of a tight space for the birds to get into. Might not be something that they want to attempt. You'd have to make the bin taller in order for that to work, and then you'd have to make it even wider on the top, because if you think about the physics of it for a second, the farther down the roof is from the spot that you're trying to protect, the easier it is for the rain to come in from the side, which means you have to open things up even more on the roof. So I went with a thin roof, like I said, specifically just to cover the thing up, with a little pitch to it, just so the rain would just wash away. And the sun is causing it to bow a little bit. which is kind of what I anticipated. I wanted to see what would happen with that exposed to the elements and to the sun. Because again, this is how it's supposed to break down. Heating this stuff up and exposing it to the elements is how you're supposed to break down PLA. If you want to use PLA outside, what I'm attempting is to paint it, right? Because if it's paint, the paint is going to protect the PLA, kind of. It's not going to protect it from the heat, but it will protect it from the elements. But the piece that I'm using, I actually have set up with a silver paint on it, which will waterproof it, right? Because remember, anything that's printed isn't 100% waterproof. It's got those bits in between each of the layers where things can seep through. So by spraying it, the paint seeps into those areas and clogs them up. And by making it silver, I think that's going to actually help keep the heat from warping it. What that's going to be used for, getting back to what I talked about last week, are the panels. I'm attempting to use a pair of actuators outside. I'm going to see if I can reverse them. And so let's start from the beginning. An actuator traditionally has the motor down at the bottom. I'm thinking about putting the motor at the top. And I made covers to go over those top parts so that the any water or anything that gets on them will have a path away. The units are not rated for full weather outdoor use. So they're weighted for pretty good use, but they're not a high enough rating for outside weather. That's why I'm putting something around them. And by reversing it, by putting the motor up at the panel level as opposed to at the strut to push the panel up, I'm hoping that the panel itself will help protect the unit, right? Because the panels are never going to be below about 25 degrees. So there's going to be a way for the water to run off and away from these devices to begin with. They're inside the scope of the panel for the most part. So it's going to be out of the way. It'll be protected from the elements that way. But not if it's the other way around. If I start with the motors at the bottom, it won't protect them. Now, I may end up having to go that way. I have to see how they actually work in the reversed methodology, because there's a couple things you need to think about when you reverse them. The first is now the power isn't at the bottom, the power is at the top. And the cabling that comes with it isn't long enough to go all the way down. And even if it did, you got to remember that you're going to be pulling that up and down as the thing expands and contracts. So it's better to, with a reversed setup, to have the power up at the top, mount something to the back of the panels, right? Because I got that metal framework there. I can mount something to the panels there to be the power for it, but the power is still going to have to move up and down a little bit. So the power cable is going to have some ability to expand and contract, if you will, as the panels move up, because it's taking the power box with it. When it's down the other side, the way I've got the first set of panels set up that you see in the video from last week, just go to the Life Hacks and Stuff website and look for episode 100 to watch it in action. The motors are at the bottom, which means the power is at the bottom, which means that the box can just sit there and the power coming into it doesn't have to move. So it's a little bit different configuration for that. So that's what we're going to do for that and see how that works out. The weather in New England has been less than helpful for the weekends so far. It's been wet. When you want to mow and you need to work on the panels and things like that, you need to have a halfway decent day to do the kind of work. And everything's just been too wet on the weekends so far for me to do anything. So hopefully we'll get a day in the week that I can take some time off and go do some work outside. So we've got the Etsy project, and we've got the solar panel project again. Other possibilities to put some garden together and see how that goes. And the reason for the garden is I've started making a couple of different types of dishes. Can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. It's an Italian name for it, but it's basically cheesy spaghetti. So you're mixing together some parsley, some red peppers, lots of cheese, and spaghetti. While it's an interesting dish in and of itself, I always want to have something more with it. So then I'll add some chicken or some mixed vegetables in there to make it a little bit more hearty of a meal. You guys know I was making foo, and the chicken foo I was making, again, I started adding more vegetables and things into it by doing the chicken overnight and letting it sit in a crock pot overnight. The chicken has been coming out just perfect. It literally falls apart when you try to tear it apart, which is the way I like to put the chicken in everything, is I pull it apart in strips, and it can get really thin coming apart that way, which makes it very nice to have in a stir fry, because you don't have chunks of the chicken in there. The chicken is interspersed throughout the entire set of rice and vegetables that you've mixed together. And the other thing I've been trying my hand at is pizza. So tonight's pizza actually went in and out of the oven very smoothly for, unfortunately, I have to say, the first time out of the half dozen or so that I've made so far. I decided to go full in with the pizza. You don't have to when you're doing it, but I bought a pizza peel, which, if you're unfamiliar, is a metal piece that you put the pizza on to put it into the oven and to take it out of the oven. And I bought a stone to go into the oven. Now, a stone is something you need to heat up in the oven first. You want to put some cornstarch on that so that the pizza doesn't stick, or you try not to make it stick. The peel will help you get it off of the stone, but you may have a couple of little issues here and there, depending on how easily it goes through. I typically end up with just a little bit stuck on the stone. Not enough to actually impact the pizza, but just a little bit left in there. And the thing that I found from doing that is the bits that are left that are very thin are very tasty. When I make my pizza, I've been making my own dough. So I'm not buying a pizza dough. I'm using wheat flour. So I got 2 cups of wheat flour that I throw in. In addition to that, I throw in a little bit of sugar, about a teaspoon or so of sugar. But I also throw in about a teaspoon of sugar into some warm water, in which I throw in my yeast. And I will then throw in a bit of salt. Now, the salt that I'm using is kind of flavored. It's got herbs and things in there. It's not just a straight salt. It's a sea salt base. A little bit of olive oil. And then about a cup of warm water with the yeast in it. And I add cheese. So Parmesan or Parmigiano Romano, throw that into the mix. I'm not as solid or as held to a measurement when it comes to the cheese or the salt. Kind of is whatever I feel like at the time. So I'll take all the dry ingredients and I'll put it together in the mixing bowl. I do not use a blender anymore. All the stuff that I'm making when I make my blueberry bread or when I make the brownies that I do from the Kodiak mix, or I work on the, we'll get to the Kodiak mix modifications in a minute, or I work on the dough, I throw all the dry ingredients together in a metal mixing bowl, and I use a spatula to blend it all together. Now, I could have used the whisk, right? Still dry, so a whisk would work quickly. Then, when I add in the oil and the water and yeast into it, I continue to blend that together with the spatula. To me, it's more of me in the process now, because I'm folding everything over and over and over again till I get it to the consistency that I want it to be. I'm not taking a blender to it and going with whatever I get out of the blender. I'm actually folding the material over and over. I can gauge how moist it is, if I have to add any more to it or not, and just let it go. For the pizza dough, I will then take it, and depending on the time of the year, if it's kind of a cool day, I will take it and I will put it in the fryer that I've got, because the fryer has a warming setting to it. So what I'll do is I'll either warm it and then put it in, or put it in and put the warmer on just for a couple of minutes so that it warms up inside to give the yeast a little bit more to work with. And I'm trying to do that the night before, and then throw the dough into, while it's still in the bowl, into the refrigerator overnight. Now the top of it gets nice and crusty. If you're good at it, you can throw that in on throw that on top of the peel, so that the harder part's at the bottom. Then you're dealing with the stickier part up on top. You can throw some white flour on that to let it absorb the moisture, and then spread it out from there. I've been taking the ball and just blending it all back together again, throwing some white flour in the bowl with the ball of pizza dough so that it all gets blended together that way. You've got to put the flour on the peel, and you got to put cornstarch on the stone, just to try to keep things from sticking. And now to the modifications that I made to the Kodiak brownie mix. So I use their double chocolate mix, which is a chocolate brownie mix with chocolate chips in it. And you can read the instructions on what's on there and what it puts in. I don't follow that for the most part. The first thing I do is I do use the 2 eggs that it says to put in. Then I decided I wanted to go a little bit different. And first thing I did was I added in some PB2. If you're not familiar with PB2, it's a powdered peanut butter. So it's peanut butter without all of the bad oils and things in it. So you get the benefits of the protein from the peanut butter without the additional cholesterol from the oils. And I throw a couple of tablespoons of that in with the mix, right? So now I've added a little more volume, so I got to add a little more, or a little more powdered volume, so I've got to add a little more other to it. But I already had the 2 eggs in there, so there's some moisture in there to begin with. But then I decided, what if, seeing as I've got something now that tastes like a peanut butter cup with chocolate chips, what if I made a tweak to it again? So what I did was I took a couple of mint tea bags. Now the milk that I use is almond milk, so I don't have to worry about the tea or anything having an impact on it. And I'll throw the tea bags in, and I'll put the milk in the refrigerator overnight, right? So it's the same thing as if you were making cold brew tea, right? If you put familiar with that, you're putting water in a jug with the tea bags, and you put it in the refrigerator and you let it sit for hours. Same thing you're doing here, except you're doing it with the mint tea. Now, in addition to that, the other thing I swap out is I use a couple of heaping teaspoons of vanilla yogurt, Chobani Greek vanilla yogurt, and I'll throw that in. So you've got the mix with the chocolate chips, the PB2 as the dry part of it, then you've got egg, and then the yogurt. So you've got a little bit of moisture in there, but you still got some thickness to it, some solidity to it. And then you add in your cup of milk that's had the tea bags in it overnight. And that adds a back flavor of peppermint, in this case, to your peanut butter cup. So you end up with a peanut butter cup tasting brownie with a nice back after flavor or aftertaste of mint to it. So that's what I'm working on so far. I've got a water heater that I have to replace. The heater, after years, finally popped. Water leaked down into the lower electrodes. If you're unfamiliar with water heaters, there's usually 2 electrodes in them, one up and one down. The main controller is usually, in this case, it was at the top electrode, with the other electrode being fed by that top one, but there was a bit of electrical down with that as well. The water fell down into that, causing it to short, causing it to scorch the plastic around it a little bit and pop the breaker. Water was still coming down a little bit in there, so that's the end of that water heater. Going with a tankless unit, but in order to put that in where it is, I've got to get the tank that's in there out, first of all, and I've got to make a framework that I can put the tankless one in, because there's nothing around it really where the water tank is right now that would allow me to mount this tankless unit. The other issue that I've got in there is the person who put the system together copper piped everything to the unit, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but then welded all the pipes. So didn't use anything that would lock down onto it and kind of seal itself. Just used bare metal and then welded things together. So I have to get all of that broken apart so that I can pull this out and then figure out how I'm going to redo that unit so that I can then pipe that to the new tankless system. And they're both 240 volts, so I don't have to worry about the electrical change to it. I just have to get the tank out of the way and then figure out how I'm going to replumb the thing. And unfortunately, we've had a couple of plumbers that worked on things here that were less than stellar. We had a sink put in, a bathroom made on the other side of the existing bathroom. So we ended up with a 2-bathroom setup. Where the other bathroom was a small guest room, so it was really not worth it as a guest room. So we put the sink in on that side, and when he did, the plumber first reversed the hot and cold and never put a cutoff in, retooled the entire thing with braided piping, so the flex piping, like I said, no cutoffs, and disconnected one of the 2 sinks that was in the first bathroom and just used a 1 to 2 plumbing setup to go and run the other 2 sinks. So I have a dead sink in the original bathroom. I've got only 1 functioning sink there now, even though I have 2 sinks. And I've got the plumbing going through the wall that was reversed, that's been fixed, but there's no cutoff. So in order to work on the sinks and get the setup fixed, or to replace the faucets that are in there, I have to cut the water off to the entire house. So first things first, I thought I was going to have to replace one of the faucets, so I got a new faucet, but that's now working okay, oddly enough. So I don't necessarily have to replace that, but I've got to put a cutoff in. That's the first thing I've got to get in place. And then after I get the cutoff in place, then I have to think about how I'm going to re-plumb so that I can run the other sink. And then I got to check the 2 sinks because they're older sinks and the faucets are exceptionally old, like 50 years at this point. That bathroom doesn't get used as much, so I'm not sure if everything works. So we'll have to see. But bunch of little projects and the Etsy updates, what I got for you guys this week, and I will talk to you all next week.